Okay, picking up where we left off, I'm on page like 161. We're talking about the merits of relative addressing and absolute addressing and mixed addressing for cell references. There's a chart there at the bottom of page 161. It talks about the quick reference, and it basically shows the scenarios we're talking about. Whether or not I have an original location and I want to copy it to some other location. Do I want it to say synchronized, so that when I copy, they both track like this or like that? Or do I want this one just to be anchored and then this one goes up and down? Okay, so the moral of the story is the dollar sign is the anchor. If I put the anchor at the B, that means the letter. That means that the x-axis isn't going to move, but the y-axis is. If I put the anchor on the number, well, then the y-axis is going to move, but the x-axis is not. If I put them in both locations, in this case, it would not have done any. It wouldn't have been any harm at all to use both the dollar sign K. Now, admittedly, I wasn't moving in the K direction. I wasn't going, X and Y. I mean, it wasn't going horizontal at all. But there's no harm in that. I mean, if I kind of sort of don't even stop to think about it, I figure if I'm using a single cell, what the heck? I'll just make them both, absolutes. It doesn't matter to me. So, okay, cool. So, like in your homework assignment, don't worry about it whether you not use mixed or the full absolute. Okay, just the bottom line is the dollar sign is the lock. That's what you need to know. And I'll tell you, when I first was using Excel, I tend to kind of get them backwards for some reason. I would go in here and I would say instead of dollar sign B something, for whatever, I would somehow want to do B dollar sign for dollar sign like that. Now put the dollar signs at the end, and of course the machine's going to say, "What the heck are you talking about?" Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right, so moving on. The next topic they talked about on page 162 is what's called named ranges. And named ranges are kind of weird. First of all, you might think, okay, why would I want to do that? So let's say, for example, this is the grade range, okay? All I have to basically do is to light up one of these, and then just over here, click on this. It's called the named box, believe it or not, and just type. Like I'm going to call this one grades. Now, I'll tell you in advance to make these things either all lowercase or mixed case like which I have here. I'll explain that in just a minute. So I hit return. So what I've done is I've created a named range. So I could go down to here and hit like sum. You know how this thing does this little autocomplete stuff? As soon as I hit the opening parentheses, it's going to give me a list of choices, right? So if I start typing like G, now here's the list of things that start with the letter G. Notice that only one of them on the list it has lowercase letters. Like maybe that's a good idea. You make these ranges lowercase. So now all I have to do is just pop on down. I'm using the arrow key. Pop on down to here to do that. Well, I wasn't done yet. Okay. Grades and then hit return. All right, so that's the same thing as typing in B2 to B20. Okay, there's no real difference. It's just that it gave it an interesting name. Now, I'll tell you that I don't particularly like this because it just makes things a little bit more complicated. When I'm looking at formulas, like right now, I click here so I can go to the formula bar to see what it is. I have no idea what range that is. Not good. But there are some scenarios where, remember now, when we do a range of cells, the range of cells don't have to be contiguous. They don't have to be together. So, for example, this is a contrived example, but let's just say I said sum. And then let's pretend like I had a row of numbers here, and I'm going to hold the control key down. And then do some more over here, and some more over here, and some more over here. Then I'm going to let go of the control key and close this guy off. Okay, now there's nothing in there, so it's going to give me a 0. But let's go back to that formula. So this is D6 colon D14, comma, F6 to F14, comma, et cetera, et cetera. Now that, okay, I'll admit, that's kind of mind-boggling and boring. That, on the other hand, would be a good place to use a named range because it's, you know, huge and it's got lots of pieces to it, and it's not simple because it's, you know, not contiguous. And so, yeah, that would probably benefit. But this over here, yeah. Okay. Let me show you a couple weird things. I'm gonna put this back to normal. I'm just gonna delete the content of that cell and go in here and just do the normal way, right? So I'm gonna grab this and put this into here. Okay. Now, humor me for a minute. If I insert right now the range, hey, oh, dang it. Okay, I guess we'll jump ahead to how do you change a range, huh? Okay. Well, that wasn't exactly what I was trying to get to. Well, I'll tell you what, let's just finish this part and we'll come back to that. Okay, so some questions. Does named ranges make things easier? Yeah, maybe. Does it make it easier to document? Oh, I can see how this could be abused and make documentation worse. So what are the pitfalls? The pitfalls is what I was getting ready to show you is if I go in here and right here and I want to add a row, okay? So right after Sharon Tate, I'm going to just do insert, okay? And so now I go in here and I put in, you know, Joe Bob. And I go here and Joe Bob made a 44.4 on his quiz. And so I go back here and I go, great. So is that inside the range? Is 44.4 inside grades? Don't know, do you? Can't tell, can you? Okay. So there are some problems. Now let's talk about the naming conventions when you create one of these things. There's a section there on page bottom of page 162 that talk about the rules for a named range. First of all, it has to start with a letter or one of a few symbols, so it can't start with a number. It has to be some sort of meaningful names. You know, don't just say data. Like, wow. You know, it has to mean something. Like this case, student grades or something. There's no spaces, so if I wanted to call it student grades, I'd probably do student with an underscore rather than a space. And for God's sake, don't make it look like a cell reference, okay? Don't make it start like with B4. I would look at that and go, wait, is that a named range or is that a cell reference, okay? Okay. That's kind of how that works. So there is a thing called a name manager. It's under formulas. Let's just go to formulas. And then there's a thing called defined ranges right here, defined names. And I'm just going to click on this name manager. And there's the name manager. Okay, I'm going to delete that guy because I find him rather annoying. Okay, you sure you want to do that? Yes! Okay, okay. Now let's go back to here. And let's put this guy back in. So sum. And I'm going to go all the way to 21. Okay, cool. Now, one more time. If I insert something in between here, is it going to show up in the range? So right now my range is B2 to B21. Remember that. Stops at 21. So I get here in the middle and I do an insert and I type in, this is, I don't know, Jill Bob. And Jill Bob's pretty good. She made a 99.9. So did it do what it's supposed to do? Pretty much. It expands. So when you insert a row inside a range, it automatically does that. Now here's the problem. That's not normally where I do inserts. Typically when I'm doing inserts right here at the bottom, right? Like this is my data cell. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna mark that with a border so you can see what I'm talking about. Normally I'm not adding in the middle somewhere. I'm using adding at the bottom. So here's where I typically make a mistake. I go here to the bottom and I say insert and I type in whatever. And I type in some numbers. Okay? So that worked exactly the way I expected. However, if this had been a named range, where this, if this portion had been a named range, and I did an insert right here where I normally would be doing an insert, the name range does not expand. Okay, so in my way of thinking, name ranges are kind of cool, but They don't behave the way I expect them to behave, and therefore I think they're more trouble than they're worth. They'll still be on the test, but I just don't think they're all that cool. Okay, so once again, name ranges, you know, I can go anywhere in here. I don't have a name. Let me put a name range back. Well, no, the heck with it. That's good enough. Let's move on. I think that's good enough. So on page 166, they talk about the formulas. So first thing we're going to look at is, what does a formula actually look like? This is a figure out of the book. So all formulas and functions start with an equal sign, right? Okay, you got that. And then you have some sort of a function name. Now in Excel, it's all in uppercase. Now it's just a naming convention. It doesn't have to be uppercase. I'm just saying you can type it in lowercase. You can type it in mixed case. You can type it in uppercase. The machine's going to say, I know what you're talking about. Thank you. Okay, so you can type lowercase s, u, m, and it'll go, oh. But when you go back to look at it, it's going to be capital S, capital U, capital M. Okay, cool. They have an opening parentheses, and then some optional things. They call them arguments because back in the day of mathematics, that's what these things were called. In the days of computers, it's kind of dumb. You could have no arguments whatsoever. You could have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a closing parentheses. So all the functions look the same. Now this is not anything new. Okay, go here, look at this. So it's the word sum, and then opening parentheses, something, and a closing parentheses. And you probably often saw me going in here and typing like sum, open parentheses, and then going to get some cells, right? And then I have to remember to close off the closing parentheses. So after I've done the selection, I close off parentheses and hit return, okay? So that's how all that works. Okay. There are some functions that take arguments. Like this one, it was expecting a row of numbers. Could I have, for example, gone in here and said sum 42, 12? Does that work? What do you think? Does this thing accept numbers as arguments? Yes, it does. It just added things together. So I could say, I want the sum of B8 and 12. Yep, that'll work. So it doesn't have to be cell references. It could be numbers, right? So those arguments could be lots of different kinds of things. Kind of sort of makes sense. There are some functions that have no arguments at all. There's one we're going to talk about here soon. Is one called today. And today just puts in today's date. And so doink, it automatically just populates the date. Kind of cool. Okay. So let's talk about those arguments in a little bit more detail. Table 1 on page 167 has what's called the type of arguments. Basically, we're talking about data types. If you're taking a programming class, you kind of sort of know what data types are. So data types are basically, these are the things that can fit in an argument. Now, I'm not saying they fit in every argument. There's going to be some where that's not the case. But, so, they are valid things you can put inside the parentheses are numbers, right? That works. Cell references. Yeah, that works. We've been doing that. Just recently, we did named ranges. Okay, right? That works. It could be text. Now, text is going to be in double quotes, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. It could be a function like sum. Yes, you can have nested functions. You can have a function inside a function. Yep. And you could have formulas. You can have formulas inside of functions and functions inside formulas. And we'll demo all that in just a second. Okay, this is probably a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. We'll pick this thing up again in just a few.